Hello aspirants, welcome to PW OnlyIAS. I'm Harpreet Singh with the daily analysis of the Hindu from 26th of October 2024. Let's begin today's analysis. So this is a QR code which you can basically use it as a means for your preparation, where you can get a lot of material that is important for your preparation, along with this particular PDF on which I'm writing is available on this Telegram account. So let's begin with today's analysis. So there are certain news articles that are important which have been mentioned in the newspaper itself. The new Persons with Disability Rules 2024. Second, the Inequality report by Oxfam. Then we have the National Mission on Manuscripts. Now, revamping of this mission is required, so we need to know the basics also. So that was mentioned in your newspaper. Along with it, an editorial on the anti-defection law. That is also discussed, so we will discuss that. Along with it, we have the news in shorts and the MCQs, along with the explanation for your preliminary practice. Let's begin. Okay, so we realize over here is that the central government has basically brought out new rules with respect to the rights of persons with disabilities, PWD rules 2024. Now, because we very well know that the persons with disabilities are a vulnerable section, their caretaking, their identification becomes very, very important. Recently, we came across a scenario with respect to the civil services examination where someone had basically misused the certificate. The person was 7% disabled, but that person had said that she is more than 40% disabled in order to take the quota for PWD, that is persons with disabilities. So in order to resolve such crises like situations and problems that come, the mechanism of proper identification of the person with disabilities has been basically enforced through these rules. So let us see what these rules are. These are important for your examination. Let's have a look. The Right of Person with Disabilities Rules 2024. Now, what these rules are, see, it is basically, first thing is streamline the application process. Now, the amendments aim to simplify the process for the person with disabilities to obtain a disability certificate and a unique disability identity card. Now, they're streamlining the process because, see, there are other people who are misusing, that is a separate case. For them, the different clauses are there. But there are many people who face a lot of difficulty in obtaining these certificates, whether to what level they're disabled or their disability identification itself. So they're streamlining the process basically by giving the disability certificate and the unique identity, that is unique disability identity cards for their identification. Now, individuals with specified disabilities can now apply for these documents through the portal UDID, that is Unique Disability Identity, and submitting these applications to the district medical authorities or medical facilities where they are being treated. Now, did you realize what is mentioned here? District medical authorities or medical facilities where they're being treated. So that means the verification of the person is also being done. And cross verification will also be done. So that will basically help you. In the identification, and then the issuing of the card will be done. Next is color coded UDID cards. Now this color coding itself will tell or basically inform us what the problem is there or to what level the disability is there. Now see, updated rules introduce color-coded UDID cards. So, moment you see the color coding of the card, you basically know that what level of disability that person is facing or having. So, white for disabilities below 40%. If you're less than 40% disabled, there the coding will be white colored. Yellow for disabilities between 40 to 79%. Right? From 40 to 79%, the color is going to be yellow. Blue color for disabilities of 80% or higher, timely issuance of disability certificate would be done. So, see here, these are three colors: white, yellow, and blue, right? For less than 40%, for 40 to 79%, for greater than equal to 80%, blue color. So, earlier what used to happen? it was very difficult to basically identify what level of disability the person is having. So already the verification will be done. Automatically the authorities will be issuing those. Automatically the cross verification is done, and then on basis of that these color coded cards will be awarded. So timely issuance of disability certificates. Medical authorities are required to issue disability certificates and UDID cards within 3 months of the diagnosis. That means the issuing authority is going to take into consideration that the person is having the issue, and when the application is being filed and when the diagnosis is made that this person is facing disability, you have to issue the certificate within 3 months. So that means the people who are basically suffering from disability do not suffer. This is also a streamlining of the process that we have mentioned over here. Next, now the question would be coming, sir, what is UDID? Over here, please remember, UDID aims to create a national database for persons with disabilities and issue each person with a disabilities with a unique disability identity card. You have the identity card, so that itself streamlines. For example, when people will be applying for civil services examination for that matter, their unique identity is going to be there. They can be easily uploaded, and even during the time of verification, it is much easier now for the authorities like UPSC also to identify, yes, this person belongs to this category or this percentage of disability is there in that particular case. UDID portal streamlines the process of disability certificates. Then permanent and time-limited certificates. For irreversible disabilities, permanent disability certificate will be issued. So sometimes what happens, there are certain disabilities in which those are permanent, which cannot be reversed. For them, we will be seeing permanent disability certificates being issued to them. Next, time limited certifications will be provided for conditions with potential improvement. That means there can be disabilities where person is suffering from some disability, but that can be improved due to some methods, or let us say ways, or over the time it can improve. So those are basically time based. So for them, certificate is different. Then we have inactive application. Applications that remain unresolved for over 2 years will be marked as inactive. So do you realize that there's a remarkable change? On one hand, we are focusing on what? First is streamline the process. The process is being streamlined to make it easy. Second is focus is on identification. Plus differentiation. What do you mean by differentiation? Because here categories have been created based on the percentage, because in the examinations also for civil services and for that many other exams, these criteria are taken, whether the person is greater than 40% disabled or not, and those based on that criteria, you basically get the reservation. So identification and differentiation from the perspective of knowing the identification. So this is what is being observed over here in this case of the persons with disabilities rules. Let's move ahead. Because we are doing the concept of persons with disability rules that have been brought, we also should know what is the Right of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016. So this is the back end of that. Under that, the rules are being created. So what is the act? And little bit of that act can be studied here. Let's see. The Right of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016, I'm again telling you, it comes under the category of vulnerable section, which is important for your GS paper 2. Along with it is important for GS paper 1 in the case of diversity or population you're studying. Also in the case of GS paper 3 in the economic dimension, also you can study what type of, let us say, economic aspects can be associated with that, even from a moral angle in paper 4 also. And even you can quote them in your essay. So this topic of this person with disabilities is very important. So what is there? Enactment and enforcement. The Right of Persons with Disabilities Act was enacted in the year 2016. Again 2016, but came into force in 2017. Next, replacement of the previous legislation, basically replaced the previous act, which was Persons with Disabilities Equal Opportunities Protection of Rights and Full Participation Act of 1995. Now what is the objective of this particular act? This becomes important. See, the objective is to ensure that all persons with disabilities can lead their lives with dignity, without discrimination, and with equal opportunities. Now, these are the three aspects which become important. These can be asked in your preliminary examination as well. So, the Act talks about dignity. Without discrimination, they can lead their life, and along with it, equal opportunities for them. Expansion of the diseases recognition. The Act recognizes 21 types of disabilities such as blindness, low vision, dwarfism, thalassemia, hemophilia, sickle cell anemia, acid attack victims also are included in this particular Act. That is why this is much more improved from the 1995 Act, because it increases or improves the gamut of the disabilities that are basically being covered. And that is the right way forward, right? So, definition of benchmark disability. A person with benchmark disability is defined as an individual with at least 40% of a specified disability when this disability is not quantified in measurable terms. So, this is known as a benchmark disability. See, for disabilities defined in measurable terms, a person with a benchmark disability includes any certificate such as by the relevant certifying authorities. Sometimes what happens is, please understand, we're talking about disabilities, we're talking about percentage, but when the word benchmark disability comes, do you realize what is it being mentioned here? See, benchmark disability is defined as an individual with at least 40% of any specified disability. That can be any specified disability. When this disability is not quantified, that you cannot measure it. Sometimes you happen that a person is a victim of acid attack, right? His or her organs, let us say, might be affected to a certain extent, but you are not going to measure it through various means. You can tell that body is affected to this percentage, but in actual terms, how much is affected, that will again be difficult to quantify. Similarly, sometimes what happens is that disability, though we realize that is there, but you cannot quantify or measure it. Like for example, if I say someone is having a weak eyesight, I can measure, right? I can measure that this is the eyesight and this is the issue. But sometimes in various other disabilities, it is very difficult to quantify it or measure it. In that case, benchmark disability, where that disability is, let us say, at least 45%, and because you cannot measure it, so the certifying authority over there will basically tell whether that person is suffering greater than 40%. So it is based on the experience and assumption and presumptions that the authorities and the doctors basically do. That is why the benchmark authority is mentioned over here. Next, alignment with the international standards. So this is basically the amendments are basically made because the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities basically proposed this, and India is a signatory to that. So that is why these amendments and changes were made and the new act was brought about. Similarly, the UNCRPD is a human rights treaty that promotes and protects the rights and dignity of the persons, which was adopted in 2016 and entered into force in 2008. That is why India took some time, 8 years, to basically bring about that. But yes, we have the act here. Let's move ahead. So this is again very interesting topic. This is the topic related to inequality, poverty, and dimensions that we generally study. Every year we realize that an organization that is Oxfam, that is an NGO, that basically brings some data regarding the inequality. Now this is very important because we tend to quote these in our essays and our general studies paper. And remember that topic of poverty and inequality is something that is relevant for all the GS papers along with your essay. You can definitely quote them also. Now see, Inequality report was released by Oxfam and Development Finance International. First of all, what are these two organizations? And then we will see what they are basically selling in their report. Now see, Oxfam is a non-governmental organization. It was founded in 1942, right? It is recognized for research and reports on inequality, economic injustice, human rights issues. So this is about Oxfam. Then you have the Development Finance International. It is an international advisory organization. It works to support the development of finance strategies, particularly for the low middle income countries. Founded in 2002, it advises the governments on sustainable development, taxing, policies, how to reduce poverty, what are the measures should be adopted, what the measures should be strategized. So they advise the governments also regarding that. So these are the two very important bodies who basically come together and prepare a report with respect to the inequality that is persisting in the world. And also, obviously, India is being studied in this. Now, see what are the highlights of this. Key findings. Now, this year, the report of 2024 marks a departure from the trend that was being seen, that we will see in the second statement that I've written over here. First, wealth distribution, the world's richest 1% own more than 95% of the humanity's wealth, right? So, can you imagine the 1% own more than the wealth than owned by 95% of the humanity? So, this itself shows the level of inequality with respect to the wealth distribution that is existing. See again, richest 1% own more wealth than the 95% of the other people who are there. So, this is the stark differences with respect to the distribution of wealth, and that is why some people are superbly rich and they're becoming richer and richer. Many people still in the gamut of poverty and again becoming further poorer and poorer. So we see this is being reflected over here. Now the second point becomes very important. This can be asked even in your examination. We are talking about global income inequality. See, grown for the first time in the 25 years. The pace at which the income inequality has, it was okay. There were certain cases we were realizing the incomes were rising, but the pace at which it is growing now, it is something not seen in the past 25 years. Earlier, what used to happen, there was a certain set of people, let us say income was rising, okay, the trend was there. But in 2024, this shows that it is a very rapid trend where the income inequalities are increasing at an exponential rate between the other set of people. So this again becomes a point of concern with respect to the distribution of wealth. Next is wealth concentration. Again, more than 2/3 of the global wealth is held by the developed nation. Now, with respect to the nations also, 66.66% of the global wealth is in the hands of the developed nations. Like you have the United States, you have the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Australia. These countries are basically having all the wealth with respect to 66.66%. So again, inequality with respect to the countries also is shown over here. Next, poverty. At the current rate, it will take 230 years to end poverty. Now, this is again a major stat. The rate at which we are going, do you realize that the sustainable development goals, on the contrary, you do realize sustainable development goals aim to end poverty by what? By 2030. So do you realize we are in 2024? After 6 years, we have to, or for that matter, whole world has to achieve this. And according to the Oxfam report, it will take at least 230 years. And when we are moving towards those 230 years, let us imagine we don't know whether what trends, what are catastrophes, what climate change issues will bring. And that can even take this year to let us even 300, 400 years also. But right now, you realize Oxfam is saying that it will take at least 230 years at the present rate in order to, let us say, eradicate the aspect of poverty. Next, billionaires have become 2.3 trillion richer than the 2020. So that means again the billionaires are becoming more and more richer. That means who are having the wealth are even increasing it exponentially, and the others who are not, they are again suffering because of the vulnerabilities that they come across. Now coming to the case of India, it says that the top 1% hold 40.1% of the national wealth, and millionaires controlling 54% of the wealth of India. Now, this itself can tell you the aspects that the differentiation with respect to the wealth distribution in India. So, in India, again, top 1% is holding this much amount of the national wealth. This can again be quoted in your examinations also. That becomes very important. Now, see, a little bit we should know the measures undertaken to reduce economic inequality. There are various schemes, but again, some of them have been mentioned over here. Promotion of inclusive growth, we have the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, MNREGA. This initiative provides guaranteed employment and supports income stabilities in the rural regions. This have been a game changer, but again, it also has its loopholes. So, this is one way, in fact, to, let us say, to reduce the income inequality and provide stable income to people who are basically working or doing manual labor. Skill development, various initiatives like Skill India, Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana to help youth sharpening their skills. Now, please remember, So the schemes are there. Again, a performance auditing of these schemes are equally important. A case study was there, for example, when we see that Skill India programming implemented in the state, in the region of Jammu and Kashmir, an issue arose that though the people are getting skilled, let us say in various sectors, but when the companies, let us say, or where they can be placed and be working, they were actually given jobs from, let us say, to in a region or in the region of Lucknow. Now, and they were being paid a salary of 15 to 20,000 rupees. They got skill, but you realize that for 15 to 20,000, they're not going to leave their own place and go to Lucknow, goes to 500, 600 kilometers from that region, even more. How will this suffice? So what is happening is there is not only the issue with respect to the scheme. Scheme is fine. Working also, there can be certain loopholes which can be improved. But after that, how the linkage of the skilling and getting a proper job is what is missing. That link is missing. Performance auditing of these things need to be done, because at last, why are you skilling the people? You're skilling the people so that they can get a good job. If they aren't getting a good job, then the role of skilling is good, okay, human development is being there, but then it is not converted into economic development, and which was the actual goal. Because if the economic development is not achieved, you cannot basically reduce the income inequalities. These are certain things or case studies which need to be worked on, and that is why only the problem of income inequality can be reduced. Next comes the advancement of financial inclusion. We have Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana. The initiative provides the bank account for unbanked individuals, which promotes saving and access to the financial services. Then microfinance and self-help groups. This encourages the credit access and promotes entrepreneurship activities also. Kudumshri is again one of the various examples that we study with respect to the self-help group and how microfinance has basically helped them a lot, which you will basically be studying in various case studies through the Administrative Reform Commission reports also. Supporting gender equality. Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao scheme. This scheme is basically improves the status of girls through promotion of education, addressing female infanticide, encouragement of equality in education and employment. So these are certain schemes which have been there to reduce the income inequality in India. Let's move ahead. Okay, now this is interesting. Please remember the article that is present in your today's newspaper, which says that Center to relaunch the mission to preserve the ancient manuscripts. Now, right now it is being proposed and it will be launched in some time. But if it is mentioned in your newspaper, you should at least know what this mission is, which is right now already there. It's just to be revamped. So certain more changes and better changes can be brought about. So if it is mentioned, so what is this mission all about? See, the Ministry of Culture to revamp the national mission for manuscripts. So let's see the dimensions associated with this. About NMM, right? It was basically established in 2003, this mission, and by the Ministry of Tourism and Culture. Now, what is the role of this mission? If you talk about it, the role is identifying, documenting, and conserving and making accessible the manuscripts heritage of India. Now understand this. You realize that India is one country which is rich in heritage, rich in scriptures, rich in text. Those from the ancient to ancient times, hundreds and thousands of years old manuscripts are there. Now, what is important is that it should be available also, because if it is available, then people can recognize what their heritage and culture has been. So sometimes what happens is sometimes very delicate scriptures are there. You need proper mechanisms through which at least if they are not so that they are not destroyed and basically they can be conserved. One, digitization of those things, that it can be available to everybody across India and even abroad, so that people can recognize the cultural heritage of India. That is why identifying, documenting, conserving, along with it making accessible the manuscript are the major goals. Please understand, identification, documenting, conserving, and making it accessible to the people is the major goal of this national mission for manuscripts. Now see, it is a national level comprehensive initiative which caters to the need of conserving manuscripts and disseminating knowledge contained therein. So do you realize that by having that manuscript, which you realize that would have not been, let us say, disseminated to other regions, because let us say it is made of some delicate paper. Now you use expertise through which those recordings of that, or let us say digitization of those records are done. Now which was basically confined to one part or one small region of the country, can now be accessible to everybody across India and the world. That means we are celebrating the culture of India. Because remember, manuscripts, these scriptures, religious scriptures, which have been over the thousands of years, they form the core or the pillars of the Indian culture. This is a right way forward in order to basically conserve them. So further revamping would be done this mission only, but we should know what this mission is. Now, there was a question in the parliament also. We'll be seeing that. So, National Manuscripts Mission works towards fulfilling the motto of conserving the past for the future. You're conserving the past for the future generations to learn what your past has been, right? So now coming to the update from the Ministry of Culture, because a question was asked in the Parliament uh, where they were asked, give us details about what you have done with respect to the National Mission for Manuscripts. So they had said over there that the mission has documented around 5.2 million number of manuscripts across the country. Can you imagine? 5.2 million manuscripts till now. It has conserved 90 million folios of manuscript. The mission has digitized 3.5 lakh number of manuscripts that contain 3.5 crore pages in them. Mission has conducted more than 100 conservation workshops. It has uploaded 1,40,000 manuscripts on the portal, which is available for obviously free access. It has published more than 100 books since the inception. You can just imagine. Those things are held. This is a representation of a heritage of India, and it is being preserved, conserved, and made accessible to the people after the identification. So the revamping will be done. As a revamping done, as a government basically discloses what are the various new components, we will be studying that also. But for the timing, it is important to understand this. Next, moving ahead. In the editorial, the topic today has come is sharpen the anti-defection law and strengthen democracy. Now see, if you want to understand this editorial, in the polity section, you should be knowing what the anti-defection law is. So what I have done is, before I basically tell you about what this editorial is, if you understand the provisions of the act which you're going to do, you will automatically understand what this article is all about. It is basically telling you what is anti-defection law. It is talking about 2 constitutional amendments that are there, and it is talking about certain loopholes that are there in these which needs to be changed or reformed. This is a simple thing. Now, before we even see what is there in the article, we need to basically see what the anti-defection law is. Now, please understand what used to happen earlier on. There used to be a concept of ayaram gayaram. This is it used to be common in the parliamentary times, that people used to jump from one party to another in, let us say, for their own benefits, for money. So what happened, there are certain restrictions had to be imposed on that. With respect to that, you cannot basically at any whims and fancies defect to some other party. And you leave your party and just go to another party for, let us say, if you are offered large sums of money. That is what we call as horse trading. In order to curb the concept of horse trading, corruption, having a, let us say, a pristine or a pure ambience of working of the parliamentary democracy, we realized that the anti-defection law was brought into India. Now we will see certain provisions also, and then we'll come back to the editorial. Now see, the main intent of the law is to combat the evil of political defections, so that you cannot simply jump from one party to another. Let us assume, I'll give an example. There is a particular party which is in power, let us say. P1 is a party in power, right? It is just touch the majority. Just touch the majority. Right? Supposingly, if 51 was a majority number, it has 51 seats. Let us assume that. Now, there are sets, let us say, other parties P2, P3, P4, right? They combinedly can, let us say, form a, let us say, government, but again, less than the 51 seats. So, what happens is, let us assume, these parties come up together and say, let us talk to certain, let us say, MLAs and tell them to leave their party. So that means the seats which are required or basically decrease. And what will happen? Tell them to join our party. Because at that time, assumably, that anti-defection law was not there. So there was no provision in order to curb this. They are selected as member of Legislative Assembly, and now let us say they are awarded crores and crores of money. They leave that party and come to this party, which is like a coalition. Now what happens? Just imagine the party which was in government, they formed a government, the MLAs leave and come here, defect the party and they come here, and these form a government, and corruption is being breeding over here. Do you realize that defection was something very common in the Indian political setup? This had to be curbed. So what happened? 52nd Amendment of 1985 added the 10th schedule to the Constitution, which laid down the process by which a legislator may be disqualified on the grounds of defection. So that means in order to curb this, there was this provision was added in the Constitution itself. Just you can understand the importance of it because it is added in the Constitution that if you basically defect, you will be disqualified. Okay, and there are certain exceptions also, but see what is being in store. Now, please understand, we'll see the provisions also which are here. But later on, we realized that there was amendment was done by the 91st Amendment of 2003, which omitted the exception of provision disqualification on the ground of defection, which is not applicable in a split. So there was certain amendment also done in the 91st Amendment. We'll also see that. But majorly, let us understand what are the aspects over here. The grounds for disqualification: the member of parliament or state legislature belonging to a particular political party is deemed to be defected. That means it has defected if. Now, these are the things that were laid down. So, these are the provisions in which one can be disqualified. So, disqualification on the ground of defection. And what is defection? See, if he, or for that matter, she also, if he or she either voluntarily resigns or gives up the membership of his political party, right? He disobeys the direction of the party leadership on the vote or abstains from voting. That means member is not following the instructions of the party. And if the party is whipped, that means a person who is responsible for maintaining the discipline in the party, in the legislature, tells to vote on certain issue and you vote contrary to that issue because possibly there can be some malafide intention. In that case also, you will be, again, there will be issue. However, he can seek the permission of the party before 15 days. That is a different case, but overall, you can be defected in the scenario. An independent candidate joins the party after the election. That means a person who who basically contested independently, but he joins the party, joins any party after the election, then in that case also, he will be treated as under this norm as disqualification. A nominated member joins a party 6 months after becoming the MP or MLA. That means a nominated member, if within the 6 months he or she is joining a party, it's fine. But after 6 months, then again disqualification is going to be there. So these are certain measures which were adopted, which is basically known as the anti-defection law, which was brought about by the 52nd Constitutional Amendment Act, which introduced the 10th schedule. Now let's move ahead. There's certain exceptions in the Indian anti-defection law. See, any person elected as speaker or chairman could resign from his party and rejoin the party if demoted from the post as practiced in Britain. That means, supposingly in the parliament, in the Lok Sabha, let us assume, a person basically is elected as a speaker. Now, if he during that time resigns from his post just to show that because I'm a speaker, I am the head of the house and I need to remain impartial, he can resign from the party, and that time he will not be disqualified because the position itself of a speaker is representing a head of the Lok Sabha, and that is not for one particular party but for everybody. In that case, an exception is provided. A party could be merged into another if at least 2/3 of the party legislatures voted for the merger. So if at least 2/3 of them are voting, in that case a merger is taking place, then we will not see any defection being happening. So this is again one of the another important aspect. Next comes, please understand, anti-defection law and the 91st Amendment Act. Now see, 91st Amendment Act further added various dimensions with respect to the anti-defection law, and various provisions were provided in order to reform the parliamentary system also. See, the number of ministers, including the Prime Minister in the Central Council of Ministers, shall not exceed 15% of the total strength of the Lok Sabha. Again, in order to just have more ministers and make it more lucrative, more expenditure on the people, that was curbed. So that means this was a means of basically attracting various parties to your own party if you are in power, in order to curb that, and along with it, restrict the expenditure on the ministers. Because if you increase the number of ministers, automatically the expenditures also increase with respect to their security, with respect to the bungalows that are provided, with respect to various other dimensions. So restraint had to be basically provided on that. The number of ministers, including the chief minister and the council of ministers, shall not exceed 15% of the state legislative assembly. Again, for the council of ministers as well as the state legislature, similar thing. The member of either house of the parliament belonging to any political party who is disqualified on the ground of defection shall be disqualified to be appointed as a minister. So if you're disqualified on the ground of defection, you cannot be basically appointed a minister. That means you're disqualified from being appointed as a position of a minister also. Again, a member of either house of the state legislature belonging to any political party who is disqualified on the ground of again defection is also disqualified on the becoming a minister. Similarly, this is for the parliament, this is for the state. Member of either house of the parliament or either houses of the state legislature belonging to any political party who is disqualified on the ground of defection shall be disqualified from holding any remunerative political post. So that means a person who is disqualified on the ground of defection cannot hold any remunerative post, because why shall the government spend on such people? Because that person is holding a remunerative post. Supposingly, a person who was disqualified on the ground of defection, now he is disqualified. So you cannot basically appoint him some chairman of some commission and all. That would be against the law. That is why it is mentioned here. In order to satisfy that person, you cannot do that. So any remunerative political past. Provision of the 10th schedule pertaining to the exemption from disqualification in this case of split by 1/3 of the member by the legislature. Now again, this is again the last thing is this I have mentioned over here. This omitted, the last thing is this omitted the exception that disqualification on the ground of defection, which is not applicable in a split, was basically omitted over here. That is the last provision. So other things you will be realizing, this is basically your complete act that we have done. Now comes to the topic of the editorial. Over here, if you have understood what is there, you will be seeing that in the introductory passage, he says that, okay, the act was introduced in 1985 to prevent horse trading. Then we realize that there are reforms that are needed. So as we move ahead, he says the concept that Ayaram, Gairam, that people were basically moving from one party to another in order to, let us say, gain benefit out of the lucrative post that can be offered to them if they defect to that political party, and they can be given positions of, let us say, ministers and all. For that matter, corruption was also breeding. So these things are very common during those days before 1985. So we realized that 52nd Amendment was enacted, which we have already seen. Then we realized that 91st Amendment was enacted, which we have already seen. Then he says these amendments were done. It's fine, it has provided a right way forward. But again, he said there are a lot of challenges associated with that. And what are the challenges? See that. He said that there is a lot of delay in deciding the cases. Please remember, with respect to the defection and all, the speaker, the chairperson of the speaker of the Lok Sabha and the chairperson of the Rajya Sabha, the one who are the basically deciding these things, the deciding authority. In various cases, these decision of the defection has actually happened, takes years and years. And that is why inordinate delay in deciding these cases is a #1 problem with respect to defection. Because see, in this case, you realize that it is like a judicial function of the speaker or the chairperson in case of the Rajya Sabha. Now, the problem that arises is, though we may agree or not agree that speaker itself, though has to act neutrally, also belongs to a political party from a background, right? Who is elected from the house to that position. Obviously, the chairperson of the Rajya Sabha is a vice president, so that is a different scenario. But in case of Lok Sabha, you see, he's from a political party. So there's a possibility that many people will say, no, why is the reason that is being delayed is possibly there can be certain bias also. So what we need to do is that a time-bound system should be there so that these issues are resolved quicker manner, right? So inordinate delay is again leads to breeding of corruption, issues, skepticism, and people even losing faith in the office of the speaker for that matter. Discretionary power in the hands of the speaker now realizes that he is a final interpreter of things and the rules in the house. The speaker in the case of Lok Sabha, chairperson in case of the Rajya Sabha. Now, if he or she says that this is the rule, this is the decision I've made, nobody can contradict it. Obviously, you can go to the courts in order to get an interpretation. That is a different case. But you will be realizing that the head, the speaker over here or the chairperson are the one who's saying is what mentions or matters in the basically house. So a lot of discretionary power is given to them whether the person is disqualified or not, because it is the interpretation of the speaker or the chairperson which will basically tell whether the person has basically defected or not. Now, this discretionary power again goes against the principle of sometimes expressed by some, like goes against the rule of law, because a lot of discretionary power is given. Next is lack of transparency. Sometimes what happens, the whip wants that the uh, political parties members to vote on certain cases. Now, sometimes the message is not being conveyed. Sometimes what the whip wants, issues with respect to the office of the whip is also a problematic issue. First. Second is that in the process of voting for something, it might basically curb the inner decision making ability of the member of parliament also. Supposingly, there is a law which has to be voted by the party members, and everybody, the whip says that all the members of the parliament have to be there because we have to vote on a law. Now, supposingly, according to certain member of parliament, is assumed that this might not be beneficial for certain section of the society, and we might not vote or we might abstain because we don't feel from voting on this particular law, because there can be differences of opinion also and difference of thought process also. But in this case, it is a ground for which you can be basically disqualified because you're not adhering to the directions given by the whip. Whip is basically an office. Every party has a whip in the parliament or the state legislature, which is basically in charge of maintaining the discipline with respect to that people vote, they are attending, and all those things for the particular party in the house. Next is what is the proposed changes that to be made. First is deadline should be fixed. Let us say over here the thinkers mentions 4 weeks. 4 weeks is the deadline. Within that, it has to be declared. This should be made a part of the law, or let us say the constitution itself. Next is prevent the arbitrary use of power by the speaker. So certain let us say mechanism of where proper parameters there which are already mentioned, but again the discretionary power is so much that basically dilutes the provisions that are mentioned in the constitution. So that is why we say that you should have a specific standard operating procedure under which a person is defected or not. And there should be basically impartiality on that. If that required, a member committee can be formed which can basically decide on that. Next is role of the whips should be modified, because the whips are basically acting as strict schoolmasters. That basically curbs the let us say thinking prowess of the member of parliament itself. So certain things need to be changed with respect to that. Again, political will. Political will is that for all these things to be made, political will of the member of the parliament should be there in order to get these changes done. So this is what is the idea of the editorial. As we move ahead, let us see what is the news in shorts. News in shorts is basically a scheme, PM Yasasvi. It is basically a Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment has implemented the Prime Minister Young Achievers Scholarship Award Scheme for Vibrant India. This is the full form of the scheme. What is this scheme all about? It basically talks about, it supports quality education for students from the other backward classes, economically backward classes, and denotified tribes communities by easing the financial burdens. Please remember, denotified tribes are basically those tribes which were declared by the Britishers as criminal tribes. So those declared as criminal tribes were denotified by the government. That is why they are known as denotified tribes. So again, vulnerable backward communities among the tribes also. So these supports these sections, initiated in 2021-22 by the merging of Dr. Ambedkar post-metric and pre and post-metric scholarship schemes, aims to empower disadvantaged group and promote educational continuity. Pre-metric scholarship for classes from 9 to 10 students in government schools, and post-metric for students in the higher education. That is the post-class 10th. Eligibility, family income should be below 2.5 lakhs for pre-metric scholarship. And implementation agencies, Department of Social Justice and Empowerment, Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. So that is the scheme that you should be aware of. So next, as we move ahead, there are the MCQs. Now please understand, these are the MCQs that you have. Pause the screen, attempt the question. 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 These are the answers for the first question. Answer for the second question. Answer for the third question with the explanation. Answer for the fourth question with an explanation. Answer for fifth question with an explanation. So this is what was for today's current affair analysis. I hope you enjoyed the analysis and you understood and gained a lot of knowledge from what was being taught. Please remember, keep on revising, keep on learning. It is an integral part of your preparation. Your reading of the Hindu and along with this newspaper analysis helps you increase your prowess of thinking ability. So take care. We'll meet tomorrow and continue with the analysis. Jai Hind.